Bulavinaka, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Psych Talk, which is the official podcast of the Fiji Psychological Society. And with us in our virtual studio, we have someone who's been a real pillar of psychology in Fiji and in our community. We are honored to have with us our former president, someone who's been really doing the hard yards in terms of her work in mental well-being and coaching, and we're really honored to have her here on the podcast because this is a real great opportunity to see the type of work that she does. Welcome, Dr. Gaylene. Yeah, welcome, Dr. Gaylene. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. Thank you for also for freeing up time from your really busy schedule. It's I get that you're really busy these days. Mm.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you very much for your kind words. Yeah, it's an honor to be here.
Right, right. So how's everything been going with you lately? Like in terms of how your practice has been going, and in terms of how things have been, especially for you in terms of life. Yeah, because I know that you've moved down to Nandi, yeah, and things have been. I hope you're adjusting well, though.
Just doing okay. The weather has been a bit of I think has been the major thing. As everybody knows, you come from, Suva to Nandi, it's adjusting to that weather. But the weather's now is perfect. We enjoy the sun. Um, yeah, in my it's not a new role, but it's a new team that I'm now involved with. I work for the Pacific Rugby Players Association, which is the I suppose the collective voice for professional Pacific rugby players around the world. So we focus mainly on Fiji Samoa Tonga professional players, and I've been doing a lot of work within the Fiji Rugby Union high performance team. So the academy, sevens, women's, fly Fijians, and the players that are based overseas. But now I'm just focusing on one team, and that is the Fijian Draw, and that's why I'm now based in the beautiful town of Nandi.
Yes, yes, it is beautiful.
It is.
Yeah,
It
and
is. It is.
yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and it's I think they're really lucky to have you because for us that do know you, yeah, for us that did join the society, especially the obvious, for when we did join the society, Offa was one of our very senior members. She was actually one of the people that founded the society, and we had Offa, and then Offa actually talked about how you and Dr. Roland, you guys managed to start off the Fiji Psychological Society, and we went into sort of we went into we didn't really go too much into detail about our discussion into that, but I just wanted to ask for you in terms of the formulation of the society. How did that sort of come about? Was it something that you felt like was a need in terms of where we were as a profession?
Yeah, I think at that stage, when the three of us sort of sat down and had this discussion, we we felt that we needed to do something as sort of like the senior citizens of the profession at that stage. We're seeing a lot more enthusiastic young people graduate. We also saw a lot of mature learners now taking up the profession, not only in psych but also counseling, and so we felt that there was something that um, a sort of a professional body, membership body, to bring everybody together to sort of promote ethical behavior, uh, upholds the standards of the profession. So that was kind of lacking in a way. So that was one of the main drivers for the formulation of the Fiji Psych Society at that time. And that was a few years
Yeah,
ago now. I
and
think we
and
started that discussion around 2013. I think I could be wrong.
yeah,
Been a while.
yeah. It has been. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it
that's I
has
think
been.
next year it would mark 10 years, yeah, next year. So that's actually like
See?
it's a real huge milestone in terms of where we're going. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So that
Right.
that was the reason, Johnny. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, in terms like because it's back when we were in our undergrad. For a lot of us, I'm not sure if you even remembered me as a student, but I used to
I
sit.
do. I
I
can
sat
actually
in
see you
for
sitting in that room
yeah,
and when I taught cognitive psych in the corner.
yeah. I, I was I was always the kid who was way in the back because I felt I
By
didn't
the
want to show
door.
anyone. Yeah, that was
See,
yeah
I remember.
yeah
There's
yeah
some
yeah
things I remember.
yeah, and just speaking because a lot of us that did take psychology during the years that you were teaching, and then we also had offer that was on the teaching staff too back then. There was a real, I think a lot of us, there was a huge shift in the paradigm of how we understood psychology, because back when we did take it, it was really just like a subject to fill whatever the electives. There wasn't really much of a passion. But then as we sort of took it, I think it was a real it was a real it was a real punch to our passion. Like it allowed us to be able to find that passion because of the way that you guys taught. And that was something that we were really thankful for, because it allowed us to be able to pursue this as a passion and pursue this as a profession, actually. So yeah,
Mm.
we're really thankful for that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your kind words,
Mm,
Johnny. Um, yeah, I was at USP for a long time, um, and it's amazing how even to this day people will come up and say, "You taught me in PS 101, or you taught me in PS 102," and I remember the face, and I always forget the names. Sometimes I'm like, "Okay, where did I meet you? What course did I teach you?" And there's just been, and people have been very, very kind over the years. It's something and I suppose with Awful would have mentioned this too. We're very passionate about what we do because we see the benefits of our profession. It helps people, and it's not just ticking a box to get a degree. I mean, that's part of it, but really it's about helping people uh, empower themselves to be the best versions of themselves day in and day out. That's my take on it anyway. Yeah.
mm, mm. It's a real amazing attitude to have towards something that it really, because the work that you do and the work that you did, it really has a ripple effect, not just towards the people around you, but towards the next generation as well. Because I think we're entering a new shift in understanding. There's more discussions about psychology as as a topic of discussion, really, because it wasn't really that before. Yeah.
No, that's true. That's true. And when you're talking, I'm just thinking about when I first went to USP to provide some tutoring for Dr. Schultz in human development. And way back then, psychology was a service program to education. It wasn't a standalone program. And it was, very difficult when you come from a university. I went to the University of Waikato. So when you come from a university where there's standalone programs, it's not only just at undergraduate level, right through to, advanced postgrad. It was a bit of a challenge to see how the perception of psychology at that time at USP was one of a service provider to the main program, which was education. And we were adamant that we were going to turn that around because we could see the interest and we could see the need as well, not only for Fiji, but also for the Pacific as a whole. And with societal changes, you'll need people in the mental health profession to provide, assistance to those who are struggling and trying to adjust to the societal changes that are happening around them. So we did see the need at that time, and we fought very hard. And so we got our standalone psych program at USP. And because of that, I think we've been able to generate a lot more interest in this profession throughout Fiji and the Pacific. And I could be wrong. I could be blowing my trumpet here, but it was something we saw, and we realized the need, the small group of us at that time in Psych, and look at it now. It's a standalone program, and I, fingers crossed, it blossoms into, fully supportive program within USP program offerings.
Yeah, and there's a really good team there right now, with Dr. Annie and a few of the academic staff that are there that are really, really pushing for a lot more growth in the field. And it's really great to see that you guys were really the pioneers of the industry, really, because there wasn't as you said, it was really just a service connection towards the main education program. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned that you studied in Waikato, which was like, which to my, which I'm assuming is a whole different level of education in terms of the resources and the intensity. In your educational journey, what were some of like the highs and the lows of how you your journey is towards becoming where you are today? Like, because you went all the way to pursue a PhD and did that successfully with an amazing thesis. What were some of the highs and lows of your journeys? Yeah.
I think there was a lot more highs than lows,
Mm.
especially at undergraduate. I really enjoyed my time at Waikato, and it's not only the learning part, but also the lifelong friends that I've made there, and who have all gone on to do amazing things in Fiji, in their various fields. So it's just been wonderful to see the cohort you were with at that time at a university, when there was always a small group of us at Waikato at that time, and they've all gone on to do these amazing things. But the journey from there to USP, I suppose, it's been a lot of highs, and I just can't think of one in particular to give an example, but it's just been an enjoyable journey. I mean, you've got to work hard at these things. It doesn't come easy, but you've got
Right.
to be organized and have that discipline to be able to say, this has to wait because I need to do this. With the PhD journey, I actually resigned from USP to continue to finish my PhD. It was just getting too much to study and work with a full load. And I got to a point where I realized that, the things had to change, and I had to make some changes. And then those changes were, I needed to leave. And so that was the best decision, by the way, of my life, was to leave. After a long time and one job, you tend to get a bit, rooted, and you get used to it. I won't say complacent, because being an academic doesn't really make you that complacent, but it gives you a sense of security over time. And so leaving really challenged me, and completing the PhD in the time I did it in was a challenge in itself. But it was all around, and I knew from the beginning, when I made that decision, I knew I had to be organized, and I had a fantastic supervisor who was able to keep me organized. Yeah.
It's because the field that you actually did your thesis in, it's something that really strikes close to the heartstrings of a lot of kids, which is the sport of writing. And you had an amazing thesis on motivation levels in terms of how it relates to players. Now, say for someone that would be reading your paper for the first time, or reading that thesis for the first time, how would you explain what you found in terms of what the paper had to offer and what the paper actually concluded?
A number of things. Just off the top of my head, I think they would be surprised that organizational stressors were the main cause for stress within that particular team, that sevens team. I studied the 2012-2013 Fiji Sevens, men's sevens team. And at the time, they were not doing too. So the study was basically based on, what is the reasons why they were not doing too well. So this is pre-Ben Ryan.
Right.
And so I went into that thinking, it's got to be, performance reasons that they're not doing well. But it actually turned out that organizational stressors was the main stressor, which caused players to don't feel like playing. They lost their focus. Their performance decreased. As a team, they weren't doing very well. They weren't a cohesive unit. I mean, they won some, they lost some, and most of the times it was losing. And at that time, and so so someone reading that paper for the first time would be surprised to see that it was actually organizational stressors. So an example of an organizational stressor within that team was things like pay coming late or a reduced pay. Camp conditions at the time, it wasn't conducive to high performance. The kit that they received, sometimes the kit didn't fit. Kit didn't fit. So shoes, some of the players, when they got their shoes, the shoes were too small and things like that, or it just didn't fit nicely. Their training gears they were a bit under-resourced at that time. Food, when they traveled, they didn't like the food. So these were some of the key organizational stressors. It's called organizational stressors because it's related to the organization. It's got nothing to do with performance. It hasn't got anything to do with it. Secondly, was environmental stressors. So when they went to cold places, like at that time they were going to Japan to play the Japanese sevens tournament. It was cold most of the time. So they didn't have enough warm gear. And that affected their focus and it affected their performance. So I think a person reading the paper for the first time would be like, this is the reason why they didn't, and excuse me. And, if you were a coach reading it, then you would say, okay, it is true that when our players are happy, and they're happy because, their pay is on time, they're getting the food they like, conditions, where they live is conducive to, it's not harsh. Their needs are being met. Then they will execute on the field, regardless of the environmental conditions, regardless of pressure in competition. They will deliver. So you've got to. There were some real world benefits of this study, and that is to show that if we don't get the organizational aspects right within the team, that can have a negative effect on performance. So I think if someone is reading that article for the first time,
because conventional understanding, like especially if you're a fan, you wouldn't really see these things because it's having that sort of understanding that these players are people too, and they go through the same issues that we go through. It's really interesting because a lot of people don't really understand it from that viewpoint. There's a whole other set of factors that do constitute performance and do actually contribute to a good performance. And did the paper actually, did it make like ripples in terms of the structure of how things were done? in terms of how people actually treated players? Was there any changes?
So I remember way back then, I gave those findings to the coach. No, it wasn't an original, it was just more verbal to say, look, these are some of the things you might want to consider moving forward. And he took them on board. And I think taking those, that was part of the changes, the ripple effect that started to occur within the Sevens team. And we started to get more consistent performances. And look, we've won 2 gold medals in the men's team and, going through a bit of a slump at the moment, but that's just all part of the things that happen, with changes and people trying to adapt to new ways of doing things. But I think
Right.
overall, the changes, the suggestions were taken on board, and I think they were utilized because one of the things that came out of that was you got happy players. The concept of Vela money was used, for example.
Right. For our viewers that wouldn't understand what velo money is, or for those that do understand what the word is, but its relation to player wealth. Like what would be what exact how would you define velo money?
I think for me it's not only the whole thing about using like loving one another and being together and things like that, but also just understanding that you need to have the right environment, and not a harsh environment, not physically harsh, or you have coaches that are abusing the players by swearing and carrying on. But you have an environment where people feel excited to turn up every day, excited to put on the jersey, because they know that they're valued. So there's a sense of belonging and valuedness within this concept of Velo money.
Wow, and yeah, and it's amazing to see because a lot of people don't really understand. A lot of people there's not really a lot of people wouldn't see it that way because they view sports as sports and emotions and mental health as something different, like two so
Very
separate things. And yeah, the only thing that would matter was probably only be motivation. But it's amazing to see that these things all do play a huge role in actually the development of a player. Yeah.
huge role, huge role. Um, there's, a lot of people don't realize there are many components to sports. It's not just the physical aspect of a sporting performance. You've got the technical, the tactical, the mental, the nutrition, and you've got a holistic element to it now, which is more around the personal development space. Yeah, so it's just not just, excuse me, the physical. It's a whole other, other arms to it to get a complete performance. And athletes, elite athletes, need to be ticking the boxes in all those areas, because it's not just the turning up to the gym every day or putting in the the efforts on the training pitch, but it's just all those other factors that you need to, or other aspects, that you need to ensure that you are ticking those boxes. Say, for example, in nutrition, eating the right nutrition, or sleep, getting the right amount of sleep, because they all factor into a positive performance. Yeah.
Mm.
And psych is just one aspect of it.
Right, right. And, so in your sorry, yeah, you're gonna say something?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, so I just yeah, because you bring up a good point about how everything is so holistic, and then like these are all wheels in or cogs in a machine, and with one cog missing, the whole machine doesn't work as well. And
Mhm.
it's a great way to see how sports has come such a far way from just to the field and playing and not really having that sort of preparation. Yeah, yeah. I think because of the way sports has developed so far. It's
Yes.
it's really have to take into account all of the different things. And how has that been for you? Like, because the sport is always evolving, and there's always new technology that's coming. Like in terms of the realms of psychology, have you how has it been for you always being able to date yourself in terms of the work that you do and the models that you use? Has that been a challenge, or has it been something that you've always looked for?
Well, I like to do it my own, I work in the personal development space now. So it's important that I do my own personal development. And so what I do there is, I enjoy reading papers around mental skills, what's happening in mental skills in relation to, say, imagery. What are some of the techniques that have been used, say, for example, in getting people to stay focused, So I'm always sort of finding out what's happening in that field. It's still part of what I keep an eye on, and that becomes my focus when I look at my own personal development. I still, engage in that space. But one of the things I found working in sport and performance in the area of sort of like performance psychology in Fiji, from way back in the late 90s to where we are now, there's been a great change and a great appreciation for the need for sort of mental skills or sports psych. And this need I've seen develop over time is because athletes are now within sort of like the Fasalok Team Fiji space. Athletes are now seeing that the importance of the other aspects that I mentioned, or other components of sport. As I said before, it was just physical. But now, you've got to be technically aware. You've got to be tactically on point. You've got to have your mental side all ticked off, the confidence, your motivation, your arousal control. I mean, these are things that people never thought about before. So I've seen that change over the years. I've seen the need for the growth in this area. We don't have enough qualified people in this area. So yeah, I've seen that change over time. I've gone off topic.
It's yeah. No, this is answering the question.
I was like, what was the mention again?
Oh no, you've answered it perfectly. Yeah, it's fine,
Okay,
Dr. J.
thank God.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, and it's I think it's great to see that appreciation has become a reality now, because I remember growing up back when we were still in school, and this wasn't really like a long, well, I think it was probably the early 2000s, and there was always this sense of dread before you walked onto the field, and there was always this sense of, like, it felt like your whole world was going to collapse if you didn't perform. How how does that normally present itself in your work, in terms of people who high performance athletes who've normally felt like they doubted themselves, and is there like a particular mode of molding that you use, or mental therapy that you use in terms of trying to get them to that space where they perform at a high level?
It manifests itself because it's the stressor, the fear, and it manifests itself as anxiety. It manifests itself in physical form, stomach ache, body ache. It manifests itself in lack of sleep, and then that can have poor, but it can affect performance. It changes performance if player or the athlete isn't able to redirect that energy for sort of flipping. I always say flip the negative into the positive. So it's a redirection of that thought, of that feeling, of that sort of that energy into something positive. And so the whole idea is around teaching an athlete to recognize and acknowledge this is what's happening to them now. So it's becoming more aware, self-aware of what the stress is, how it's affecting them and how it's manifesting. And not to see it as something, oh my God, it's the end of the world. I'm not going to perform well, so don't exaggerate and don't catastrophize, but say, okay, this is what's happening to me. This is what I know what to do. And, over time, the athletes I worked with, it's just about teaching them how to control those thoughts and those emotions and use it for the benefit rather than pushing it aside. Say, this is what's happening to me. This is what I'm going through. Why? Okay, I'm doing this because 4 days from now, I'm going to be, going out to play in the world champs or something, the Olympics. And this is a natural reaction to, a stressful. And so this is my way of experiencing it. Then they're able to say, okay, well, now flip it. Acknowledge, flip it. What do? It's about changing your thoughts. The athletes I worked with over the years is all about building that routine, sort of pre-game mental routine. And it's about having something in place where they go to when they're starting to feel, for example, the butterflies, or they're starting to feel that they're not sleeping properly. And it's about doing that check, that inner check. What's going on? Why am I doing this? Then flip it. Get back into sort of like a blue head way of thinking rather than going down the red zone and then going out and choking and crashing, doing a performance. So that's just a simple way of looking at it. I mean, there's different things that you can do. It depends on the athlete and depends on the sport and the level of awareness of that athlete, and just teaching them, specific things around them and getting them to become more aware of their thought processes and their feelings and what happens to them when they react. So, for example, in my thesis, I found that when the stress was high because pay was not coming in on time, or the camp conditions were real shitty, players just disengaged. That was one of the main ways in which players reacted, and they disengaged by just avoidance, denial. They started diverting their energy into other things. So they started looking for things to pick on, for example. They would just some of them would just quietly accept and then just go into the silence thing, the silent way of doing things. So it was a coping strategy. Just be quiet. And so when the coach would ask them to do things or whatever, it was always no response. And at that level, you need to have some, you need to be communicating. There needs to be responding to what the coach is asking or the strength and conditioning trainer is asking. And when players were just shutting down, and that caused frustration, Yeah, so but I'm getting to understand how people react to stress during, say, a competition or performance. It helps with then going and teaching other athletes, okay, this is something that's sort of common in the Fijian context, silence. This disengagement is something quite common in the Fijian context. And so when you're working with, say, swimmers, for example, or basketballers, then you know that this is the common way of dealing with stressors in the Fijian context. So you're able to assist the athlete start preparing themselves mentally for competition. For competition. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And one key point that I wanted to ask about, because you mentioned like how silence is a huge, it's a very common coping strategy, or it's a very common way of people trying to deal with their anxieties and just not being able. And it's really common because I wanted to ask, is when you say that it's a cultural thing, how much does culture really play into player motivation? Like, is there a huge, is it a real huge component, or is it just one of many?
It's one of many, but I think in our context, we got to understand where the athlete comes from. So culture in that sense would fall, because you have high performance culture or sporting culture, team culture, and then you have identity culture. And so in a high performance environment, the two don't mix. So for example, a young Ital man coming from a traditional village into a professional, say, rugby environment, where they are required to communicate on a regular basis with coaches, with medics, with management, with media, within the club, the media personnel within the club, where they've got to communicate. This is very hard for them to do, because if you come from a culture where you've got to respect your elders, for example, a coach asks you something and you look down, or you can't say what you want to say because of that respect. This is viewed in a negative way by some of the coaches. I'm not saying the coaches here, but this is general speaking. Is viewed in a negative way. Say, oh, that person is shifty. But in fact, it's because of the cultural upbringing. The young man isn't able to fully engage with the coach because of respect. So that's just one example. However, they do learn over time. This respecting one's elders in the cultural sense doesn't, they need to make some slight changes when they get into a high performance environment. The culture there requires one to be more open-minded, more responsive when you're communicating with people in, say, authority, like coach. So the athlete needs to learn very quickly that this is their culture at home, and that's fantastic. But there's certain aspects of it that doesn't survive well in a high performance elite environment, and so they quickly learn to adapt. For some players, it's done very quickly. They realize they're fast learners, they're great adapters, they make those adjustments, and they get on with it. Others, it takes a while. It takes a while because it's just who they are as individuals, that's their personality. They just need to be guided to say, okay, this is what you need to make some changes on. And if you can't speak to the coach, who else could you speak to, and just find ways around that. Yeah. That's just one example of how traditional personal culture and identity can impact at that elite level. I'm talking elite level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, there's a really good piece because there's a lot of stories of really talented players that did enter these elite level environments, and then there was a huge culture shock that happened, and then there wasn't really much like their talent didn't reflect on the field because of all these other factors, and because you work a lot with the Pacific Island player wealth
Players
with
Association.
dealing with all these things. Yes, the
Yeah.
Players Association in dealing with those sorts of things. Like, how have you been able to help players in terms of that context, especially in terms of the shift in culture and understanding that these are two different sets of ideals and values that you try and maneuver in between?
But when I was based within the Fiji high performance environment, Fiji rugby high performance environment, one of the things we would do would be, when we know a player is departing to go to, say, France, I would call them in and we would do what we call a pre-departure education. And that would cover things like your finances, how to budget, who's picking you up, things like who's picking you up from the airport, where will you be staying, do you know anything about the club, do you know where the club is based, what kind of clothes you'll be taking, do you have warm clothes? And then if they don't, for example, I would say if you can't afford new ones, go to, Value City or Bargain Box and get a nice jacket, things like that. And one of the things we would talk about was this whole thing around, communication. And it's not only, and I built that into the personal development program for academy players as well, where we talked about communicating with people in authority who may not be of the same culture of us, and how they expected us to look them in the eye, for example. When you wouldn't do that with the people back home in the village, but in their culture, they expect you to do that. So learn to, when in Rome, so to speak, and to do that at that level. Because when you go home, you'll follow what tradition and cultural norms expect of you. But here, in this environment, you'll shake your hand. For example, I'll teach them how to shake hands, how to maintain a bit, eye contact, not to put your head down, because they see this in, I'm saying generally say they, but it is viewed in that the person is being shifted if they're not maintaining eye contact. Yeah. Johnny, is the sun is right above me?
Oh no, it's perfect. It makes
it's okay. Okay.
Yeah, it looks
Okay.
really good.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Alright. Sorry. We have sort of glass on the top. We have like a frame like this, and the roof is like this, and it's glass.
Okay.
So the sun is coming in the sun is setting.
Oh,
So that's why I'm sort of like moving, thinking, oh God, it's not, it's affecting.
no,
Sorry.
it looks good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just back to what you were mentioning, like this pre-departure education. Do you think that, because a lot of local players, they normally get picked from local clubs whenever there's scouts that come over,
Yes.
and whenever there's a player, do they all pass through that department, or do some of them just go straight through?
Sad to say no. Because of our reach was only within the Fiji Rugby Union high performance team, so the representative teams and the academy. We didn't deal with the players that would be picked from, say, village tournaments, or agents would go into the schools, say, in London, for example, and take kids there. So we didn't get that opportunity, and what we did try and do is we created a program which focused on schools and communities, particularly local clubs, where we had somebody go in and teach them about agents and contracts, and talk a little bit about the whole overseas experience. Unfortunately, COVID hit, and so we couldn't really fulfill the goals of that particular project. But the idea was education, awareness was critical to get to the community level, grassroots level, around what it's like to live and play overseas, and the whole issue around agents and contracts, understanding contractual obligations, understanding your right as a player when you're working with an agent, because it's a bit of a wild west with agents at the moment. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. This just, because sadly, I think we're running out of time right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just had one last question. What would be, in terms of because a lot of times our culture, in terms of how we react to losses and how we react to, as a community, we don't really take losses that well, in terms of like being able to accept that certain things were out of our control, or maybe these were the better team, or the other team was better on the day. Now, in the court of public opinion, what does it normally look like from the viewpoint of a rugby player, or a player that's being judged by the community? Is it something that really weighs a lot? Because I'd have I imagine that it would normally affect the player a lot in terms of how they see things and in terms of how they view themselves, so self-esteem. Because social media is so common now, and then you have all these things that are sort of like affecting their sense of morale. Is it a factor that really
Oh, yeah.
affects them?
Oh, yeah. You talk to the experienced players, say the experienced sevens players, because everybody in Fiji has an opinion on the Fiji Sevens men's team, win or loss. They always have an opinion. And social media has facilitated the expression of that opinion, good or bad. And so, in my experience, when you talk to an experienced sevens player who's been on the circuit for some years, they kind of like say, "Oh, we don't read it," or it doesn't bother us. But if you talk to a young person or a rookie coming through, it really affects them. They have to learn to not read and take it personally if they're going to read what people say about them. But it does affect them. It really affects them, like to the point where they start to believe what the public are saying about them, and that can have huge effects on mental health and motivation.
And in those cases, what do you normally say to them? Like, what would be the mode of treatment in terms of helping them process these emotions and process and deal with these things?
I wouldn't use treatment because that's more of a clinical term. And when in my
Right.
work, it's
My
more
apologies.
around mental skills. Yeah. So I focus on mental skills, which is more a goal-directed approach to teaching athletes about performance. So it's more focused. Whereas, anyway, I'm going off track. But what I do teach is around what we can control, controlling the controllables. And there'll always be people out there. There'll always be noise out there. There'll always be external, aspects to what you do in life. And it's just about having your goals, working hard towards them, having routines in place,
Right.
developing habits that will help you reach your big goals, putting in place lifestyle aspects that will help you again reach your goals. Understanding the power of social media, but don't use it don't let it use you in a negative way and get to you. And it's all about that control, understanding that these things happen. It's normal, but you don't have to believe it. It's within your control. Right. Yeah.
That's beautiful advice, and it's a good way to sort of map things up. Yeah. I'm sorry. We'll have to. Once again, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Gaylene, for availing your time and just enlightening us here. For access, is it be okay if I put a link to your thesis at the bottom of the description of this?
I think it's available at USP Library.
Right.
I think I agreed to that a long time ago.
Okay. Yeah.
There's also
Yeah. Right. So for if you want access to her academic writing, we'll be putting the link below the video. Thank you again, Dr. Gaylene. I'm sorry that we had to cut off. It's just this app doesn't allow this app doesn't allow me to go more than an hour. And we have
Has it been an hour? Wow.
Yeah. But thank you so much for imparting your knowledge on us. It's been a really amazing talk, and I hope that everything does bode well with you in the future.
Thank you, Johnny, and thank you for what you're doing. This is just an amazing platform for the promotion of psychology within Fiji, for the society in general. So thank you for all that you do, and wishing you well. Naka.
All right. So Nawalewo is to our viewers. You can catch us next on our next show. Nakawalewo is you have a good one, everybody. Naka.
Naka.
Yes.